So hi Neil, thank you so much for coming down today. Obviously welcome to the People in Housing podcast. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Oh, thank you for inviting me. My background, environmental health is my first love and career.
Yeah.
I did that for 10 or so years. And then I switched over to housing about 12 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah.
So bit of a switch. So instead of serving notice and harassing landlords, I became the landlord that needed to prevent that from happening in the first place. And then I, worked at a couple of housing associations, and worked on everything from, general property safety compliance stuff all the way through to the new Building Safety Act.
Perfect.
That's pretty much
That's
me
pretty
in a
much
nutshell.
you in a nutshell. Amazing. So what do you think the most important thing people should know about you today, obviously to have that trust in you as a speaker today?
I suppose my multiple perspectives from enforcement through to being on the other side of the fence lends a bit of credibility just because I know generally what regulators look for.
Of course,
So there's part of it, but over the past 5-6 years, I've been very fortunate to be parts of lots of different groups. So at the moment, I chair the National Housing Federation's Building Safety Group.
Yeah.
So that's a group of a dozen or so housing associations that look at trying to come up with best practice and steer people, other housing associations along the way to achieving really good building safety.
Of course.
And then I also, it's not actually been announced yet, but I also now sit on as an expert advisor to one of the working groups for the Buildings Advisory Committee. So I'm advising that committee that sits under the Building Safety Regulator. So
perfect.
Hopefully that gives a bit of credibility, but you can't, don't trust everything I say. Always say what I say to all my guys, just make sure you don't forget that your professional curiosity is one of your most important things. So anything I say, please always have a look at it closely yourself.
Yeah, of course. And of course, I know there's going to be a lot of things that a lot of people are going to have to relate to. So I know one of the main things at the moment is recently a lot of organisations are obviously experiencing downgrades in the industry. So can you walk us through that? Like, what did that look like and what were the challenges that you faced?
Blast from the past. Downgrade in 2015. It was a really bold step because they self-reported to the regulator, which certainly wasn't the norm back then, and still, some would say isn't the norm now. But really honest and open with the regulator, which is massively commendable.
Thing to do, of course.
So they self-reported in 2015. We had at that point 6,500 unactioned FRA actions.
Wow.
And he had about 75% of our FRAs completed. Had a gap of about 27,000 EICRs, the electrical certification. Barely had an asbestos register, and there was a load of issues with Legionella. Not uncommon themes that you still see in
still seeing that happening now as well.
But we were the first housing association to be downgraded for non-gas safety-related elements. So myself and a chap called Nick Melling, shout out to Nick, still the best boss I've ever had. We were brought in to fix that problem.
To help,
and of course. We built a really strong team and worked tirelessly.
A lot of hours. Spent a lot of time together probably as well, and with everyone to sort of do that.
Had the odd beer occasionally.
Keep yourself going.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time of my career, and look back on it with a lot of fond memories professionally because of the things that we did, but it really did underscore the fact that housing associations, if you do take your eye off the ball, you expose so many people to so many risks, and our obligation to our customers to prevent that safety risk is so important. It was a really good experience. Really crucible that's forged the way I think and work now. So yeah, it was a fun time.
Oh God, 100%. I think with things like that as well, you can really learn from those sort of things. What do you think that like other housing associations could take from that and learn from it if they're experiencing that themselves?
It would depend upon the position they find themselves in.
Okay. Yeah.
But some of the core things that I think really still resonate with me today and that being enshrined within our team are that trying to focus just on the slavish following of KPIs is at the root cause of why things go wrong in the first place. So if you have a look at how there's a big divide, and that it's less now, but certainly back in 2015, there was a huge divide between the way we looked at occupational health and safety, so the safety of our staff, and the safety of customers. And that, there is still a big divide, and that's why the Building Safety Act is so foreign to a lot of people working in the built environment. They're expecting the regulator to tell them what to do. And whilst I agree there are certain things that are difficult to try and work out and implement before you submit to the regulator. The point is, the regulator isn't going to tell you what to do because that would be prescribing. And that's the exact opposite of what you do in occupational health and safety. And that's why it's such a good system and a mature system. So one of the biggest things that you can do to try and transfer some of the learning that we've had since the 70s, since the Health and Safety Work Act came out, into the built environment is to transpose the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. So when the building safety regulator and when the legislation was being, the new stuff was being written, the reason they've gone down a route of recommending BS 9997 and other safety systems is because they want to get people doing the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. Now, what housing has gotten into a habit of is focusing on the do part, how many fire risk assessments have I done, how many actions have I got outstanding, how many asbestos resurveys have I done. That stuff that you can put a numerical value on. That's the stuff that housing really focuses on. And what it forgets to do sometimes is how well have you planned? How well have you learned a lesson? And I can understand why people don't necessarily do that because it's really bloody difficult.
I can imagine. It's not that actual number, like you said, that data, right? It's that you can see.
And that's probably the underlying message that I always give my guys. This stuff's never done. It's not like running a project on your home and building an extension. It's more like housework. It's never going to stop. It will always get
continuously
more messy. And then you've just got to keep doing things and then find better ways of doing things. So that for me is one of the fundamental things that people that I would advise the built environment professionals that are out there is to stop looking at things like a prescriptive list of things I've got to do. To right, how am I going to plan this to be really good, then implement it, and then learn what went wrong, and then enact the changes. So it takes longer, and you will mess up. And part of the problem that the built environment have got at the moment is that mess ups cost a lot of money. It's not like I've accidentally delayed that fire door inspection or whatever. That doesn't have a massive cost. It's I've submitted a plan for Gateway 2, and now it's been rejected, and now I've got tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds just ebbing out of the business. So I appreciate that what I'm advising is difficult and potentially expensive, but ultimately it will end up in a better, I have faith that it will end up in a better position. I had a look recently at some of the publications that were released following the output of the Health and Safety Work Act. And you'd be amazed at how similar, when you look on LinkedIn now, about the comments being made about the way the regulator's behaving now, have a look back at how they were
how it
talking
was
about the
then.
HSE
Yeah.
back then. So
Yeah.
it's almost identical.
Really, yeah.
So it will get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to
a
be
bit
painful.
of time and a bit of patience as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, when yourself and the team were obviously going through that, how did you approach it during that difficult time for the team?
As a team, we focused on seeing things from the customer's perspective.
Okay. Yeah.
To try and make sure that we weren't so focused on the KPIs we were forgetting the humans.
Mm-hmm.
So an example of that is we changed our team name, and this is way before this was in vogue.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, this is 2015, 16.
Okay.
So prior to Grenfell,
Yeah.
we changed our team name from property compliance to customer safety.
Yeah.
To reinforce, we're not here to achieve the bare legal minimum. We're here to keep people safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even that small tweak changed things. So when we were going to finance and asking for additional budget, it wasn't, I need more money to achieve the bare legal minimum compliance. I need more money to invest in customer safety.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, your finance partners are, I understand this.
Yeah.
I understand it, and it is something that needs investing in. And you then have that similar impact on your supply chain.
Yeah.
So you're gonna, we don't have a big DLO that sits and does that at the moment. So making sure our supply chain lives and breathes that as well.
Yeah, of course.
It's so helpful to turn around and go, from compliance to safety, they understand there's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you as a leader, me as a leader, sat there telling your guys, come on, break your back for me to achieve the bare legal minimum.
Yeah.
It's not inspiring anyone, is it?
It's not the right language, is it?
But if you turn around to them and say, look, I need you to go back to the well for extra energy because this is you're keeping families and their children safe.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you get that extra energy and you get that extra work from people that you probably wouldn't do if it's just about chasing numbers.
100%. And I guess like you sort of said, like the inspiring and like more like the motivating. Yep. How did you keep that team motivated? To obviously when you were trying to achieve the same goal. Because
we're a national housing association, we had to move around with the problems in the stock sometimes. Okay. So that meant that a dozen or so at some points were in a hotel, localized to a problem that we needed to deal with, and so that team bonding we did there was amazing because you spent a lot of time together. Learned about each other's families and all that sort of stuff.
And a different level that's away from work.
And so it ended up being in a position where you didn't want to let the rest of the team down by not trying 110%. So there's one aspect, but it always comes back to it's very difficult not to be inspired by trying to keep other people and their families safe.
Yeah.
And if you aren't inspired by that, you don't really end up in the team for very long. Because of course. Because we ask for a lot of dedication in that mission. And if you're not prepared to give that dedication, you tend to get you don't end up in the team for that long. It's just too intense.
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. And then, so obviously in terms of, I know you sort of spoke about the team and things like that. So what do you feel like the main traits are for finding that right person to join a team that's obviously been bonded and that's had that motivation together?
It's really simple.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think we're really fortunate in that because we work differently to others. So part of the team structure is we got rid of the divide, the traditional divide between the compliance part of the business, which usually does, the policy writing, procedure writing, does the fire risk assessing or the Legionella risk assessing, or at least manages the contractors on that function. And then what they do is they sort of pull the work, put it into a system, and then divvy it out to other teams to do the work. We got rid of that divide. So my team looks on paper to be much bigger than other compliance teams. But it's not. It's just that my team isn't a compliance team. I do. My guys do both the policy procedure writing and the risk assessing, and then 95% of all the works that come out of those risk assessments.
Of course.
So that ends up in a world where it's very different to most other housing associations. So we learned very quickly in the early days that if you got someone from a compliance background, they were quite poor at managing all of the contractors, because it's a very different skill set.
Yes.
You need to have a lot more empathy and be much more problem solving on your feet.
Of course.
And then vice versa, you didn't have, there were people that just didn't have the ability to sit and concentrate on the same thing for 5 weeks to fix it. And what we ended up finding was actually these people don't exist. These all-rounders don't really exist. We're going to have to create them. So where that ended up, it became very simple. From instead of us trying to navigate, lots of people out there that were putting their CVs into us for the perfect candidate, we realised we needed to create them. So it boiled down what we searched for, and still to this day, it's at the core of what we search for when we hire new people in.
Of course,
is raw intelligence, and professional pride.
Right.
If you've got those two things, and you can demonstrate that in an interview, you've got a really good chance of getting into that team.
Right.
And more importantly, you've then got a really good chance of progressing through that
and
team.
having a career, a future with.
So if you look at my team, we've been together for 10 years now. I can't think of anyone. In fact, there is, other than people that have literally just joined, there is no one in that team that hasn't had at least one promotion. Most of them have had 2 or 3. And that's partly because we've created
that bond and a similar goal together. Of course.
But it's all fundamentally on those two common denominators. So that's my advice.
Other traits. And how would you sort of identify those characteristics? Because obviously, having an initial conversation with someone at face value, you don't know those things. So how would you sort of feel that and recommend pulling out those characteristics or identifying them?
In interview, anyone that's been interviewed from our team, it's I don't know if it comes as a surprise or not, but the questions aren't your normal questions, or actually they are the normal questions, just not necessarily for a compliance team. So we rely quite heavily on things like what's your leadership qualities? How do you lead a team? Leave a really nice open question. And then you'll find people that have thought about it and therefore are intelligent. And have had that introspection to understand that, right, this is a leadership post, I'm going to have to really think about my leadership.
Of course.
That's the professional pride part. And then if they come up with a really good answer to that question, that nice open question, you can almost sense that they're there. And then the other questions, the other absolute classic, almost, well, it is not even almost cliche, it's definitely cliche, is your strengths and your weaknesses question. So tell me your strengths and your weaknesses. You can immediately find out who's just Googled. Anyone that comes into a strengths and weaknesses question and says, sometimes I'm a perfectionist. Right,
it's my weakness.
It's very nice to meet you.
Going straight to Google, like you say.
They've not got that introspective. They've got not that self-awareness, and it's not that they can't get that. And we try, particularly if it's an internal candidate, we make sure that we feed back to the candidates that there are certain aspects that you need to think about how you're answering these questions. So that's the way we go about it. So I think it often comes as a surprise to people trying to get into our team that we don't ask more technical questions.
Definitely.
But you can rely on a CV for some of the technical stuff. You can't rely on a CV for those raw intelligence and professional pride indicators.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you need open questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think, like you say, when you mentioned before, it's so important of having that like similar thing as a team, because of when you're going through those crises, you've got to be on the same mission as well. Do you feel like there's anything else in the industry that you just feel like we're not really talking about enough?
Yes, but not necessarily that it's what we're not talking about enough.
Yeah.
We're talking about these things a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just I don't think it's got to the right level of detail yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So the two things that I think are not necessarily silver bullets, but are things that if we got right, the whole playing field gets easier. And I'm not just talking about safety, I'm talking about the whole of housing.
Housing industry.
The first one is information management and data. So, you know, through the years, I've been fortunate enough to write and contribute to a fair amount of all of the golden thread information and guidance that's come out.
Of course.
And through that, I've had to study a lot of how housing manages data.
Yeah.
And what I've realised is that data management is so poor in housing that until we get that right, we might as well just throw money up a wall.
Yeah.
And it's not like people aren't talking about it. So you've got the golden thread, you've got key information management from the Ombudsman, you've got lots of people talking about and highlighting that data is really important.
Of course.
But no one's quite understanding why the data doesn't work. They're not getting, they're knowing the symptoms of the disease, and they're pointing out all the symptoms of the disease, but they don't truly know the cause. And if you don't truly know the cause, how are you supposed to fix it? So I think there's a deep question that needs answering around, you know, we've got 3,000 odd housing associations. How is it as a sector been allowed that we effectively talk 3,000 different data languages? That's just, there's no way any of your supply chain can be efficient in all of those different languages.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's slightly more talk around data tables, around things like UK housing data standards, which I'm a massive advocate for. That if all housing associations turned around tomorrow and said, I'm going to start using the UK housing data standards, it means that when you talk about a building and I talk about a building, we know what the same thing is. We're using the same definition. Whereas, you know, at the moment, if I went to another housing association and I said we own this many buildings, we wouldn't agree. We nearly merged with an organisation 2 years ago. Took us best part of 6 months to work out how many properties they owned. Because they knew how many properties they owned. It's just they had a different definition of property to us.
Right. Okay.
And so it's something as simple as that. But try that across the thousands of different attributes and sub-attributes you have in a data system. So I think that needs to be fixed. And there's lots of people working on it. But I think there's not enough depth of conversation around the director, exec director, and even board people to really understand when you say we need to sort our data out, what that truly means. So there's that one. And then once you've got your data sorted, it's probably going to take 5-10 years to do that. The other big thing that I think is necessary for us to really transform housing is to fix the competence situation. So you know, there's a lot of non-competent people just simply because, to a degree, we're all non-competent with the new building safety regime and everything, and you know, the new Arabs law and all that sort of stuff. We're all semi-incompetent on that because we don't know how to do it. It's new.
Absolutely. And everyone's learning.
It takes a long time to
perfect it.
Exactly. It takes a long time to do that. So I think there's a big space at the moment for people to try and fix that. And you know, more power to the Rolbo if they come up with some solutions, because that again is a structural issue that's going to take a long time to fix. But it's well worth the effort, because those two things coupled could just transform our services for our customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think obviously, you've mentioned some amazing things there, and I think hopefully a lot of people will be able to, relate and with some of the things that they're going through as well. So, but yeah, well, thank you so much, Neil. Thank you so much for coming on the People in Housing podcast.
Pleasure.
And yeah, thank you again for your time.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.